Welcome to Backstage Pass with Gail Davis, your invitation into the world of keynote speaking and event planning expertise. Join us as we pull back the curtain and dive into exclusive interviews with speaking industry experts. From seasoned speakers to master event planners, we're here to provide you with the ultimate backstage experience. Get ready to unlock valuable insights, tips, and strategies that will elevate your events and leave your audience inspired. Welcome back to Backstage Pass. I am your host, Gail Davis, and today's episode is one that I have been really excited about. If you are an event planner and you're looking for a speaker that delivers real impact, energizes audiences, and leaves them walking away transformed, you're going to want to listen to this conversation. Our guest today is Tara Renze, and Tara is an award-winning keynote speaker. She's an author. I have a couple of her books here. There's also a children's book, which I can't pull away from my granddaughter, so I don't have that here. But she's got, she's this great author. She's an emotional intelligence expert, and she's really passionate about helping people unleash their purpose and their potential. She's worked with some of the biggest brands that we all know, Amazon, T-Mobile, and today she's here to share how she helps audience be who they came to be. Tara, welcome.
Hi, I'm so excited to be with you. One of my favorite people in the world. So thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. I don't know when we started working together, but I know that my team is just on fire with the response that they're getting from their clients. So it's really a positive relationship, and I'm excited to share more about who you are and what you do with audiences to our listeners today.
Well, thanks. And I have to tell you, your team does such a good job of pairing me to the right audience. Every time I've joked before that sometimes I'll get off the stage and be like, I kind of felt like Eminem at a retirement community. Never with GDA. It's always like, I just know, like, going into the event, I'm like, this is going to be a slam dunk because it's just always a match made in heaven. So I appreciate that as a speaker.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the trick. I was a corporate event planner, and so I know the importance of that. And that's really where I wanted to start with you, because I know you also come from a corporate background. So I'd like for you to bring people up to speed, the whole corporate leadership, entrepreneurship. How did you become a keynote speaker? Just give us that story, Tara.
Yeah. I joke that I never was like, someday I'm going to be a keynote speaker. But just everything I feel like I've done in my life has led me to this. So I started out in corporate America. I started out in sales. I was one of those wacky people who loved sales. I just loved the connection, the just being out, not in an office all day. I was traveling all over. I worked for careerbuilder.com. So we did work with some of the biggest brands. It was right when the job boards were booming. And so being able to connect them with talent through the internet was just this brand new concept, and companies loved it. And it was obviously way cheaper than headhunters at the time. So I did that and became one of their top sales performers, and then went into sales leadership and I ran 2 sales offices for them. Proud to say that my sales offices were sales office of the year. We crushed it. And I think it was because we had so much fun doing what we were doing. And this emotional intelligence aspect, it played such a big role in how I led my sales teams. Then I went on to actually consult them on a leadership level, where I was actually flying from office to office, working with their leaders, as well as running their in-house sales training out of Atlanta. And then, I had this thing called motherhood happen after my husband and I were married for 7 years. We were like, if we're going to have kids, we probably better get on this. So suddenly, we had 2 kids and all that travel and all that corporate. I really wanted to be more present as a mom. So I shifted into social selling and started a business out of my house, selling jewelry actually, and then it was for Stella and Dot, and kind of helping them. I was one of their initial leaders that helped them build out this Midwest market and finding other people who wanted to do that. And that was amazing. And I went all the way to the top with that. And then I had this calling to really, this message, this Be Who You Came to Be message was actually a note that my grandmother wrote to my infant son, almost 18 years ago. And so this message, this Be Who You Came to Be message, was always a guiding light for me as a mom in my career. I used it with colleagues when we'd hire people to come into our sales organizations. I'd be like, hey, we hired you for a reason. Like, we love your authenticities, your gifts, your talents. Pour it in here. Like, we want you to be who you came to be here. And I just kept seeing how every time I empowered someone to be who they came to be, whether it was personally or professionally, it changed, first off, their self-regard and how they thought about themselves. Like, it really kind of made them step back and be like, be who I came to be. Wow. Like, I've never really thought of my life like this. And so it changed their self-regard, but then it really changed how they showed up at work, how they showed up in their relationships. And so it just became such a calling for me that I was like, this is crazy, but I think I'm going to write books about this. I want to share this message, go out and be a keynote speaker. And, people thought I was kind of crazy at first because I wasn't a Fortune 500 executive or had climbed Mount Everest or done something completely prolific. I didn't have some splashy resume, but I had this message that I believed in so much. And I think that's why it's been so successful, is because it's relatable, but it's also, it's something that I am so passionate about. I just believe in it beyond reason.
I love the message, and your passion and enthusiasm comes through so strong. When I met you at an industry conference, like I said, you had your 3 books there, and I love it because I think there's something for everyone. I think this is a beautiful book. I know not everyone is looking at the video, but this is the Be Who You Came to Be book, and it's so pretty. It stays in my bedroom. I love that one. And then for people who like to journal, there's a Be Who You Came to Be journal where you can keep ideas and thoughts. But I love the children's book, Tara. I think you wrote that with your
You know
mother.
what? I have one right here.
Oh yeah. I came home from IASB that year, and it was genius that you offered the book, because everybody who travels, like, this to me is the pro tip to event planners. Why not have children's books at your conference? Everybody's scrambling buying the same stuff at the airport gift shop to bring home a little gift. And those girls love that book. I think I called you the next day and said, I know it by memory. But it's such a cute concept. It's about this little bee who's trying to be all these different kinds of bees, like a carpenter bee. And then when he finally realizes he just needs to be who he came to be, it's so cute. And I'm here as a litmus test that little girls love that book. And it's
You know
such a great
what?
message.
It's a darling book. And I co-wrote this book with my mom, who was she has her master's degree in early childhood ed. And one of her big goals in life was to write a children's book. And so I was like, Mom, we should write this book together. And so she knew, how to write a children's book with the repetitive, the
Yes.
boom, boom, boom. And I think you were like, you kept being like repeating all those things that kids love.
They
But it
love it.
is such a great book. And, one of the things that has evolved with just this Be Who You Came to Be message is who it's meant for. When I first started out, I spoke predominantly to women, and the pretty book is written to women. And then, I kept seeing like a lot of men would be in the room and be like, we need this message. Like, I love this message. I need this message to lead with. I need this message as a father, as a husband, as a dad. And so then I started speaking, to more gender neutral audiences. And I also kept hearing like kids need this message, teenagers need this message. And so the message for the kids, I think if we can teach kids self-acceptance and to find out what they're good at and what fulfills them from a young age, that changes everything. Because so many times kids, parents specifically want their kids to be like them. They want, and I always say, like, for raising my son specifically, I'm like, I have to remind myself, like, he didn't come to be who I wanted him to be. He didn't come to be who his dad wants him to be. He has to figure out who he is and who he came to be. And so it's really powerful from that standpoint too. And kids do love it. And it comes with the stickers and the map and all that fun stuff. So
I I love a keynote when I'm sitting there and obviously you're telling me things I need to know for why ever I'm attending. So let's say I'm at a sales conference and I'm getting this information and it applies to my career. But I'm also making side notes like, oh, I want to use that with my child. Or, oh, that's really true about my wife. And I think that's what really happens with your message is it really hits on so many fronts. You talk a lot about emotional intelligence and you also talk about mental fitness. For event planners that are listening, can you put into context what these topics are and why they're important for audiences?
You know, emotional intelligence is understanding our thoughts, ideas, and emotions, not only ours, but then how they impact other people. And so my definition of emotional intelligence is simple. It's understanding your thoughts, ideas, and emotions, and then we choose how we show up regardless of how we feel. It's this notion of, yes, we're all humans, we're all entitled to a bad day, but you're not entitled to give someone else a bad day. And studies have shown that emotional intelligence is responsible for 58% of success in the workforce. I mean, I've actually pulled some other stats here. Um, 60% of people right now are feeling emotionally unattached from their jobs. One of my favorite EQ statistics is that 80% of customers say that the experience a company provides is way more important than their products or services. Well, the experience is the people who work there. And so how are they showing up and how are they making other people feel? And that ultimately is emotional intelligence, is that, those people that have that it factor, it's because they've made you feel confident, feel good about yourself. And so we can get mentally fit and really start to navigate our thoughts, ideas, and emotions. And this is so important because studies also show that 80% of our daily thoughts are negative, are biased, and are repetitive. And I think if you really start to think about the mind just triggering thoughts all the time, it is interesting. Most of them are negative, they're biased, and then they repeat over and over and over. And so once we can understand that we're not our thoughts and we get to choose how we show up, it gives us all of our power back. And this whole notion of you are not your thoughts changes people significantly, because suddenly they're like, oh, I'm not a negative person. I am not, I am worthy. I am enough. These are just thoughts. And I can get mentally fit enough to be like, oh, that's just a thought. I'm going to move that to this, front part of my brain where I can process it in a positive way. And it's become so powerful that I've even had messages from people that were like, I mean, one of that just took my breath away was this woman messaged me and she said, I used this Be Who You Came to Be messaging and this You Are Not Your Thoughts to talk someone out of suicide, because it was those thoughts can become so overwhelming that they cause people to, one, question if they're enough, if life is worth living. But then you have to think about even the people who aren't in that mental state, but just how it causes them to show up of, not their best self. And ultimately being who we came to be it's this highest form of emotional intelligence. Like we elevate our self-regard, we slay our self-sabotaging beliefs. It elevates our interpersonal skills. It gives us space for empathy with others, but it also allows us to assert ourselves when we need to. And so it is just such a powerful, it's a very simple yet profound message, but it's very powerful, because I think it's really easy for people to be like, oh my gosh, I've never thought of something like this before. And they can put it to work instantly.
I love the concept of I can become mentally fit enough to know where to put those thoughts. And you mentioned motherhood. We have that in common. And it's a skill to not let worry take over the way you raise your children. I mean,
Yes.
I can think of times, when they first take the car out on their own and this thought can start in your head and you just have to say, no, I can't go there, so it's training your mind. I guess that's what it
Yeah,
is. It's
well, so
training your
so
mind.
they've done all the studies. I got certified in emotional intelligence because I believe that is the path to being who we came to be. Because let's face it, it's not a lack of talent or opportunity or intellect that hold people back. It's all of these negative thoughts and these negative beliefs that keep us playing small. But along this way, I realized that this mental fitness. So there's this guy, his name's Shirzad Shamin. I don't know if you've ever had him on your roster before. He definitely is worth looking at. He's so interesting. And he wrote this study called positive intelligence, which is this pathway to really, it's been proven to elevate our EQ, which is this notion around mental fitness. So I ended up going and getting certified in positive intelligence as well, because he had done all these studies on the brain that showed the back part, the mind is either serving you or sabotaging you, one of the two. But what he found was the back part of our brains is where all of our negative thoughts are. And this back part of our brain is also where like all the serotonin and dopamine, or not the serotonin, the stress and cortisol is produced. Well, they found this front region of our brain is where the serotonin and dopamine is produced. And this is where all of our positive thoughts live. And you can literally get mentally fit enough to be like, this is a negative thought. I'm going to flip this to the front part of my brain just by recognizing it as a thought, not a truth. And it's so powerful. And, I joke about that, it's, if you really want to think about, the best way to understand that you are not your thoughts is at 3:30 in the morning, you can be in a dead sleep and the mind will wake you up and be like, hey, remember in 2001 when you had too much to drink at that cocktail party? Like, we're going to talk about it right now at 3 a.m. And you're like, how in the hell am I thinking about this right now? but then and so in the middle of the night, I have to be like, oh my gosh, mind, this is not serving me right now. These are thoughts, and I'm not doing this right now. And really being able then to understand that the mind is triggering thoughts, and then a way to reroute that has become so powerful. Now, I still find myself in rabbit holes, but I work on mental fitness every day.
I love it. In preparing for this, I was looking at some of the descriptions of your primary keynotes, and I thought it might be helpful to sort of talk about those and how they're different so that people can understand what might be best for their audience. So the ones I keyed in on were Be Who You Came to Be, Get Mentally Fit, and then your leadership keynote, Secrets to Level Up Leadership. So we talked a lot about Be Who You Came to Be. Is there anything more you want to say about that? And maybe share some of the exercises that people walk away with, because a lot of times I know the question is asked, well, that sounds like a really nice topic, but what's the actual takeaway? What will people walk away with? So when
Right.
it comes to that particular keynote, what else can you share?
So the Be Who You Came to Be keynote is a great opening, getting people ready for the 2 day experience or the 1 day experience, whatever it is, getting them in the right mindset to learn, to grow. And it's also a great closing. So I do that one a lot of times when it's like a big conference, they want a great opener or a closer for people to either get fired up or take the learning home with them, and to keep thinking about whatever experience was provided for them. Um, it does incorporate a lot of emotional intelligence up front, really getting people to understand this idea that, they're not their thoughts. But the Be Who You Came to Be is this 3-part methodology of how do we create, own, and live the life that we deserve and desire. And this incorporates both personal and professional development and ideas. So the first part is creating it, which is getting people to shift from constantly trying to create happiness in their life to this. I call them these EQ breakthroughs, of these little mind shifts. Like, you don't need to be happy, but you do need to be fulfilled. And let's think about what's fulfilling and our work specifically. you know Work is hard. Like, careers are hard. Going to work every day, dealing with teams, leading other people, all the interpersonal, it's not easy, but it's deeply fulfilling. And so we go through this mindset of like, hey, you don't have to be happy, but you do need to be fulfilled. What does that look like personally? What does that look like professionally? So that's the whole creating it thing, which is another one of those kind of major aha moments of people like, gosh, this gave me so much perspective, because we kind of live in this world of, I don't want to say toxic positivity, but we're constantly telling people just to choose happy, be happy, get happy. And then when they're not happy, they think something's wrong with them, or maybe they're not at the right job. And it's like, hey, you don't need to be happy all the time. You got to be fulfilled. And when we focus on fulfilling things, that's what create genuine happiness and epic success. So that's the first part. Owning it is owning who we are, knowing that we're not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. And also owning our success stories. This idea that, like, nobody cares about your success more than you, and you're going to have to show up. You're going to have to go all in. You're going to have to be the one, to advocate for yourself, to elevate, to get the certification, to do whatever it is. And then live it is all about really becoming a holistic person. And I always say, when we start focusing on ourselves, getting better, personally or professionally, everything else in our lives change. Our relationships get better. So really helping the audience reignite some personal or professional goals that maybe they put on the back burner because, life started happening, they put it away. And the more we get into our middle age, the less we think we still have time to go reignite these goals. And this one's fun because I talk about my experience of going on the game show and the reigniting this childhood dream of getting on a game show. And I have the $100,000 pyramid clips. And by this time, the audience, we've formed all this great camaraderie. So they get to see me fail epically on national TV, saying that Lance Armstrong was an astronaut. But I had redemption and got back into the winner's circle and ended up winning. And so it's a fun ride for the audience. So that one is, lots of stories. Get Mentally Fit draws more of the positive intelligence in, and really understanding what positive intelligence is, how we self-sabotage. And then the secrets to level up your leadership. This is a great one for an afternoon or a breakout session, because I work with the leaders to say, hey, what's going on within your organization and how can we pull and plug? I mean, I've got 25 plus EQ secrets that I've, used through the years, I've learned. And so they might be like, hey, we're having customer service issues, or okay, great. So then I'll customize the presentation with the specific secrets that really resonate with what they're dealing with. So that it's fun. It's not as overarching, this grand like opening keynote, but it has some really great tactical takeaways. And that one is a perfect one to expand into a workshop.
That's what I was just getting ready to ask. Do you ever do the opening or closing keynote and do a break-off session or a workshop at the same conference?
I would say 60 to 70% of the time, because I'm an EQ practitioner, they can get CE credits. So we work it so they can get the CE credits so I'll do a lot of times the opening keynote, and then I'll stay and do a couple workshops in the afternoon.
Well, thank you for bringing that up because
Yes.
I can think of one client in particular, and that is so important to her. So that's
Yeah.
great to
And
know.
it's fun then, because we've gotten to know each other, and I think it's because of my background in sales leadership and running, sales teams and sales training. I love a workshop. Like, honestly, like I'm not opposed to, like, if you don't want me as the opening keynote, bring me in for a workshop. I love work. I'm all about value over vanity, and obviously I'm a keynote speaker. I love a big stage, but man, I love being in a workshop room where I am actually seeing the content transform lives. And I've done, little workshops where there's 50 of us in a room, and I've done like these huge workshops in a grand ballroom where there's 500 people at rounds. We're workshopping, we're sharing. I mean, it's a vibe, it's fun. And just to see that purpose ignite in people is so rewarding.
Oh, I love that. So this leads me to my next question. Obviously, you have a background in sales, so to me, I can only imagine you get requested a lot for sales kickoff meetings. But what else? Do you do incentive trips, leadership conferences? You mentioned you started at women's conferences. Talk to us a little bit about those audiences that are asking you to come and speak and where you're
Hmm.
really landing.
Yeah, so I started in women's conferences. And I know we've done a lot of women's conferences together. I always say, like, it is women specifically, they just love this message. So that's a home run every time. Yes, sales, any sort of sales kickoff, um, direct selling, they love the message. Anyone who's in kind of a entrepreneurial type role, so that would be insurance, real estate executives, people who are in the hair and makeup industry, um, interior designers, anyone who's in that kind of creative space, they also love this Be Who You Came to Be message, because they're probably very purpose driven in their work and what they want to do. So it works well for that. But I got to tell you, sometimes I'll get a booking. I did one last year for mechanical engineers, and it was an international group. And I thought, what am I doing? Like, and the CEO like requested me, and I had the call with him, and I was like, why did you pick me? I flat out asked him, I said, I just want to know why you picked me. I want to make sure this is right. And he just started talking about the importance of personal development for his people. And he wants them to become better humans. He wants them to know that they are cared about in this organization, and who they are as a person is more important to him than who they are as a professional. And he was like, if I can show them that I care, and I can show them that they matter and that they are enough, what could they do within this organization then? And I was like, okay, this is why you hired me. Like, let's go. And it was just it ended up being this great experience. And, I do think that's one thing that's interesting about this message, Gail, is that, and I didn't know when I set out that this would happen, but people say, I felt like you were talking directly to me. Whether they're new in their career at age 22 or they're on the verge of retirement at 65. And I think it's because it's such a relatable message that they're spinning their stories the whole time I'm talking. They're thinking about their life. And I am vulnerable enough to share some, crazy things that have happened to me, and rejection and all this, that it's so relatable that they feel like it works for them. And I even did it last year in Munich where they were translating it. I was really nervous about this. I was like, gosh, how are they going to translate my words, my message? And will it make sense? Like, will Be Who You Came to Be translate? It was a standing ovation. They loved the message internationally. So I was like, oh my gosh, my grandmother who wrote this note, I wish I could just hug her right now and be like, you're changing lives all over the world, Dot. Her name was Dot.
God. Well, you may have just answered one of my favorite questions, but that is, what do people say when they come up? So you said they say, I felt like you were talking directly to me. Are there other comments that you hear frequently from people after
Hmm.
listening to you?
I think that we as a society don't realize how many people are struggling with their self regard and wondering if they matter and wondering if they're enough. And so every time I speak, I have people waiting to talk to me afterwards to say, like, I just want to say thank you for making me feel like I'm not crazy and that I now have these tools to navigate my thoughts and that I am enough. And every time I speak, I hear this about someone who's struggling, or I get a message afterwards. It says like, you took a burden off of my heart. I mean, some of these messages I just get are, honestly, I'll sit on the airplane afterwards because they come to my email. They fill out the post event to get their workbook afterwards. And they don't have to leave comments. Like it's not required to get the workbook, but they leave these comments of just feeling good about who they are as a human being. And that's really the ultimate goal of the message, right? Is that people know they're worthy, they know they're enough, they know they matter, they know they make an impact. And they're going to own who they are, their success story, knowing they're not going to be for everyone, but they're also willing to own their flaws and to say, hey, I am not perfect, but I am going to work on becoming a better human every day and navigating that through emotional intelligence and mental fitness. And also, I think what the other thing this message really does is it unites people because we realize who I came to be is not who you came to be. And we can honor each other's authenticity. And so it creates this connection and this culture of acceptance because suddenly it's like we are all different, and why would we all think that we have to look alike or talk the same or believe the same? And just because we're different doesn't mean we're wrong, and it holds all the space for really allowing people to be who they came to be. I always say, like, you didn't come to be them. Like, we love to compare ourselves to other people, and that probably is igniting something. I always say, like, hey, admire whatever it is that you're comparing instead, because if you're admiring it, it really ignites possibility, where comparison is one of those negative back part of the brains, right? Where we're like, oh my gosh, it makes you feel small and all these things. So um, there's just so many I think it's just those little nuggets of takeaways that are instantly that you can put to work that make it impactful and memorable.
I was noticing in our notes that describe how you do your presentation, it says that you use tools like positive intelligence assessment and mind shift tracker. Um, is this something you actually use during the presentation? And if so, how does that work?
Hmm. So the PQ assessment is available to any audience member after it's in my workbook. It's a free assessment that they can take to understand their self-sabotaging, their saboteurs, like what is sabotaging them. So for me,
Okay.
I'm a hyperachiever and a pleaser. Those both can be great things until they're not serving me anymore. Because when things don't go my way, or I'm not getting a gig, or something happens, I suddenly, the hyperachiever in me is like, hey, you're not doing enough. Work harder, go faster. And so that's the PQ assessment is one of those things that I love using in a workshop, having them take the assessment before, or giving them, it takes about 5 minutes to take it. It's not a really major assessment, but that's a great one for the workshop. The which other one? Oh, the ACE
Mind
methodology.
shift tracker?
Oh, the mind shift tracker. That's also in the workbook. It's just those where we start making mental notes of like, hey, I thought this, I shifted it to this.
Oh,
So that's
okay.
one of the ongoing. One of the things that is like the ACE methodology to conflict resolution, which would be always assume a misunderstanding, C, collaborate. Let's work through this. Like this. So always assume a misunderstanding is that usually when there's conflict, two people are, something's happened.
Yep.
It's almost always a misunderstanding. And when we approach things as a misunderstanding, it's so different. I mean, me being like, hey, Gail, I feel like we've had a misunderstanding. That's so different than like, hey, why wasn't I invited to that meeting? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it suddenly diffuses. Um, we don't have this feeling of like self-defense. It ignites empathy. It allows us to assert ourselves. So that's one of those EQ tips that we use. I do use a really great one in my overall keynote, the Be Who You Came to Be. I call it the clear mirror to self-assess. And this is in this is in the own it section and it's the notion of like, nobody cares about your success more than you. But how do you get better then? And so the clear mirror is this idea that when we're looking in a mirror, we only focus on ourselves, right? I mean, you're not concerned about what's going on in the background. You're focused all on you. And so the clear mirror to self-assess is something I used in the corporate world with my sales reps. They would come in for their quarterly reviews, and rather than me assess them, I'd be like, you come in and you tell me how you're doing. Use the clear mirror, go through your book of business. And so I tell the story about how I taught my son Ben to do this when he was about 8, playing baseball, because I noticed that kids would come off the field and they would say, how did I do? And what do we say? You were great. Like, even if they're tragic at baseball, like the parents were like, that was an amazing game. And the kids like, really? Because I don't really think this is my sport. And so I tell this fun story about teaching Ben how to self-assess for baseball to use the clear mirror. And so rather than just walking them through to use it, I put it into a story where they're like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. And they oftentimes go back and try to teach their kids how to do it, which they can very easily learn. Kids are very smart. But it's also then that great way for them to be like, okay, now I understand how I could do this for myself. So usually everything in my keynotes is some sort of a story. It's going to be more memorable than me being like, let's walk through the 4 steps to do this. Just because it's more fun. And, the audience actually loves that story about the baseball. So,
Yeah. Did it work?
oh my gosh.
Is he playing baseball?
You know what? Ben does not play baseball anymore, but he was self-assessed enough to be like, I don't really love this sport anymore. He played for a long time, and I will say it changed how he showed up in the game, because rather than me being like, you need to go get a batting lesson, like you need to work on your pitching. I was like, what did you do really well in this game? And he was like, gosh, I really, that pop fly I caught or whatever. And then I would turn the clear mirror back and be like, well, let's talk about the 5th inning when I knew he struck out. And he really started thinking about him in the batter's box versus trying to blame the pitcher, trying to blame the umpire. It was like, hey, what are you in control of? And yeah, he got to be a great baseball player that summer. But what's interesting about it with both my boys is we've always used this clear mirror on pretty much everything, even like their art, like they'd bring home a bunch of artwork. I can't keep all the art. You know this. You raised kids. Like, they bring home a lot of quote unquote art. So we started using the clear mirror. Like, are you proud of this? Is this your best work? Is this refrigerator worthy? Well, what's happened over time is they've caught onto the skill, and it's transcended into how they approach their schoolwork. How they study for tests, or they get their grades back. If you get a B, like, are you proud of the B? Like, could have you got an A? Like, I don't know. I wasn't there taking the test. Their relationships, it's really been a very powerful thing, because as much as we love feedback and, we want feedback, if it's not welcomed, or if I can't say first, like, hey, I really didn't feel like I did a great job pitching in the 5th inning. What do you think? Versus me saying, how was my pitching? And I'm like, it wasn't great. Like, it's just a different way of
Yeah.
ownership and being able to
Right.
own who we are and what works. So, yeah, it's been transformational for my boys.
That's wonderful. I wanted to ask you specifically about your authenticity. I think you are one of the most authentic people I've met, and you really lead with it. And you're so vulnerable. You mentioned that word earlier when you talk about, your roles as a wife and a mom and a business leader. Did you ever struggle with bringing the personal stories to the stage, or did you always know that was going to be your way to connect?
hmm No, I mean, there's some stories that I didn't share for a long time because I thought, like the ones that my book got a 1-star review. And do you know this story?
No.
Oh gosh, I'll just tell it here real quick because it's just
Okay,
that
please,
vulnerability of
please.
not. I wasn't comfortable enough to tell the story for a long time because I was like, I can't get on stage and tell these people I got a 1-star review. They hired me to keynote. But the story is that I got, I put the book out. I was getting lots of great reviews, and then almost a year later, my husband found the 1-star review, and he's like, oh gosh, you got a 1-star review. I was like, a 1-star review. And it wasn't just a 1-star review. It was this, I mean, it was a wicked, horrible review. And then she said that she donated my book to Goodwill, threw it in the Goodwill pile immediately. Well, as it would happen, months later, I get a message from this woman. And this is when I could tell the story, right? From a woman on Instagram with my book, and she's holding it. And she says, look what found me today. And I was like, oh my gosh, you found my book. Like, tell me about it. She's like, I found this book on a day I was losing my heart. And I just felt drawn to it. And I was like, well, I'm messaging her. I'm like, and so I share the text messages or the Instagram messages, where'd you get the book? And she's like, I found it at Goodwill. um, and I mean, you have to know that. And what was funny, Gail, is she wrote, I go there to find stuff that speaks to me. And then she wrote, "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I hope the location isn't disheartening." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you don't know how much this means to me." But once I was finally gave myself permission to tell a vulnerable story, right? About you're not going to be for everyone. And that's okay. Like find the people who need your message. Find the people who love you. Find the people who want you to be exactly who you came to be, because that book found its way to her, because that's what goodwill is, right? I mean, people send stuff there because it no longer suits them, but then someone else goes and is like, "Oh my gosh, this is perfect for me." And so once I told that in the own it section and I gave myself permission to tell the one-star review, that's when it started changing everything. And I think being able to own my own story, and I think, it took social proof and knowing that people like the message. But anyone can tell someone else's story. But if you're vulnerable enough to tell your own story, those are the ones that people really find that relatability with, of like, "Oh my gosh, she's just like me." Like sometimes people don't like
Exactly.
her, you
That's
know?
exactly where the connection comes through. I think one of the best is Brene Brown.
Yes.
Every time she tells some super vulnerable story, I'm like, I know we could be best friends because that she is speaking my language. That happened to me. So I think
Yeah.
you're similar in that way.
And she's that person who gave us all that vulnerability permission to be like, this is where the connection happens.
Yeah.
This is where when we humanize ourselves, I always say, you're only human. Like, find those human connections, because that's where we relate. And that's, I think, when the messages stick long after the event happens. Long after whatever we're like, "I remember she told this story," or she said, "Be who you came to be." Um, you know, so I think it's those little connections, those vulnerable connections, that make all the difference.
Awesome. Well, is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I will share one thing with you. That's a new thing I'm doing. I
Oh, good.
haven't. This is the first to announce it. And it's all around this mental fitness and what's happening in the world with I believe, mental illness. We have been rocked with multiple suicides, teens, my brother-in-law. Just it's been happening more and more, and so it's back to this notion of you are not your thoughts. And so I'm actually working now to start partnering with mental health awareness, suicide prevention. I'm going to be donating after every keynote to either a local cause or a cause for the client, because it's just happening, way too much. And I think that we're not talking about it in the right way. And just from the feedback I get of people saying this simple message changed the way I feel about myself. And it gave me back some of my self-love, and it gave me back some of my self-regard. So I'm going to be doing more and more with that, and sharing that. So if someone's listening and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we have a foundation that you need to talk to," come and talk to me. I'm actually doing a speech just this and later this month for a high school, because they love the Be Who You Came to Be message, and really helping these teens feel like they're enough and feel like they matter. So I'm really excited about that, just to take the message to the next level. And I think that's something really beautiful about our industry, is when I set out to share this message, never did I think that I would get a message from someone being like, I use your message to save a friend's life. Like, unbelievable. And so it's been so interesting and really a beautiful journey for me to see how the message has impacted, started with women, and then men, and then kids and teens, and now it's even helping with this mental health crisis that our country is under, because it's a simple message of self-regard and love for each other. So I'm excited to carry that message and make an even bigger impact, both by advocating and with funds and money. So
And opening up the conversation. That's so
yeah.
important. Well, thank you, Tara. I always love talking to you.
Oh, I
Yes,
love you
yes, I love it.
too.
I love it. It's just so clear you are where you came to be. I mean, you are shining. That message it's just landing on so many fronts, and your authenticity and your expertise. I love that you did get certified as an emotional intelligence
Practitioner. It's
practitioner.
very,
Okay.
it's very official. I mean, my parents were like, "This is the closest thing to a doctor this family will ever
Yes.
have."
Well, it
God,
certainly gives you that credibility.
It was definitely nothing like getting a doctorate, but it sounds good, you know?
I love it. And, I think if you're out there and you're an event planner, hopefully throughout this conversation, you've gotten a taste of how Tara connects with audiences. And it's obvious that, there is a connection there. So if you want to take a look at bringing Miss Tara in, let us know at GDA Speakers, because she would be a great person to have on your next stage. Thank you so much, Tara. And I look forward to our next time that we get to connect.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us on Backstage Pass with Gail Davis. Tune in for more exclusive interviews and pro tips to elevate your events. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. We'll catch you next time behind the curtain on Backstage Pass.